Hi guys, welcome to the Lunge and Lift podcast. Today we're joined by a very special guest, Mr. Brad Welch of BW Commando Fitness. Brad's a very experienced ultra endurance runner and he's worked with some really elite runners covering all distances. And today we dive deep into the nuances of run training. We talk about why people like running so much, what are the nuances between ultra endurance running and more recreational running. We go through some of the common pitfalls and mistakes that the typical runner might make, and also some of the detail behind why doing zone 2 training can benefit you, perhaps some of the pitfalls there, and also why you might use kilometer splits and speeds to target during your training, but also why you might not want to be doing that. It's a really fun episode. If you haven't checked out episode 9, when Brad first came on the podcast actually over a year ago, please do. And I think you'll really enjoy it. So please listen up. But before we get into it, as always, a big thank you to our sponsor, Wit Fitness. Check out the store in One New Change, St. Paul's, or the website at www.wit-fitness.com and use discount code LL15 to get 15% off your purchase. Right, let's get into it. All right. Brad, welcome back, mate. How you doing?
Hey, guys. Good. Thanks for having me again. It's been a while.
It's been a little while.
You was one of our first few guests, weren't you? I think you was episode 8, I think?
Yeah, I think, pretty early on.
Early doors. So it's a real privilege to have you back on after a year, I guess. Has much changed with you since?
Yeah, I'm not seeing as many people just randomly run 5K now, which is good. But apart from that, all good, mate. All good.
That's good.
So for the listeners who didn't check out the first episode, we had Brad on in the early days of Lunge and Lift and discussed the 5K fad as lockdowns. Yeah, it must have been just as lockdown started, and everyone was doing their run.
I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. So definitely worth checking that one out if you haven't already. Today we wanted to do a bit of a deeper dive into running. Like, Brad is a very experienced run coach. He's got a lot of miles under his belt personally as well. So we thought it'd be a great opportunity to dig into a topic that I think a lot of people have grown more and more interested in. I know Rob and I have definitely upped our run volume over the last couple of years, and given the restrictions to gyms, I think a lot of other people have also started to learn to love running. So I guess, Brad, why do people like running so much?
So I'm going to speak about from personal experience first, and I think it kind of follows what most people like about it, is that you can pretty much tend to switch off when you're running. I think it's one of the only sports or hobbies, either in a gym or out the gym environment, where you can actually completely switch off. Compare it to, let's say, you're in the gym, you're on the ergs, you're probably constantly looking at the numbers, right? RPM, calories, seeing what you can hit. Even cycling, road cycling, you obviously need to be a lot more aware of traffic and what's going on around you, I think. Well, with running, unless you're being an idiot and running on the road, you pretty much tend to switch off and just, I think that's the main thing for a lot of people. And for me, it was one of the biggest reasons why I initially fell in kind of love with running outside of the military, was just that you can just kind of switch off, and regardless of distance, whether you're going to run for 20 minutes or whether you're going to head out onto the trails for 2-3 hours. It's just that moment of you're not looking at your phone, and you can kind of get away from that. I think really that's number one why most people like it, love it.
I think there's also the thing of it's quite a low barrier of entry, isn't it? You put on a pair of running trainers and that's about it. Because it's how much, even though I love cycling, it's such a ball ache to do, especially when you're on the erg, because it's like, once you're on, you have to make sure all your nutrition is around you, all your drinks around you, and but because once you're on, you don't want to get off, because then it ruins like the workout you're doing, it ruins the intensity. So you have to have everything with you, and it's just like, it feels like so much more preparation, where with a run, for most, it's like, right, okay, put on a pair of trainers, get out, jog slow for a kilometre, then pick up your pace, if you're lucky, or it's just go out the wall, bang, run. So, as we've discussed.
and I think kind of like what you said there, it's a bit of a faff, even like I said, with technology, like setting up Swift, if it's not connected, suddenly you've wasted an hour just trying to connect your cadence monitor. As such, where like you said, with running, you can kind of head out, and even if you, like I said, if you don't have a Garmin watch, or it doesn't matter, you can track it somehow. But you're not obsessed with that in the earlier stages, or you shouldn't be. So I think, like you said, it's for everyone, and you're seeing that now. Again, kind of diving off from that, you're seeing that now in the ultra communities. That before 3-4 years ago, it was very much like people who had run before doing these events. When now you're having someone turn up and it's their first 100K, and they've come from a half marathon background, and the communities are kind of more kind of, I guess, focused on the newbie ultra runner now rather than the experienced one, because the experienced ones are always going to turn up, right? They're always they've already got a passion for it. They might already have kind of a base in terms of their performance, so they're always going to want to race. Where for the longevity of the sport, it's about obviously bringing in kind of your everyday runner and showing them that actually ultra running, or kind of the more endurance side of running, isn't just about times and distance. It's about meeting other people and getting out in nature and seeing that kind of thing as well. And I think coming off the back of lockdown now, that's huge for people. Like, they want to get out and they want to meet people and they want to get out of London and see different places. So I think it's a really cool, kind of exciting time for, I guess, ultra running and kind of running in general. You see it even with like your more conventional kind of run clubs, like the pure sport run clubs and all these type of. Now they're getting like nearly 100 people, which is ridiculous, really. Like when you think about it. I remember like back in the day, like Nike run clubs, you'd get maybe like people. I think.
I'm definitely curious to see how, once park runs proper come back up and running, how will they improve? And like, because it's like one of my clients, she does park runs all the time, and it's so I think they either come back at the end of May or they're coming back at the start of June. I'm not too sure, but I'm really intrigued to see, as you said there, about that community side, because people know they turn up to the park run week in and week out, and they see the same people. They're building that thing, and it's on the ultra side of things. Why do you think, beyond the, just say, the community side of things, that people are getting a bit more intrigued with endurance, like the super endurance? Because 50K, 100K, you're talking about a long time running, and it's like, part of me gets it, because obviously I'm loving like pushing myself to these limits, but that's a long time, and the intensity is a lot lower. So I know we're going to touch on a bit later in the podcast, maybe discussing like zone 2 and stuff like that, but it's in like, I guess I haven't tried it, but I guess your intensity is a lot lower when you're running for that long. So what's the draw to it?
I think again, it all stems from social media. So first, if you're not in the ultra community, right, it seems so far away from where you're currently at. You're like crazy people running for 12 hours or more, 15 hours, right? Then you start to see stuff on social media, and it's rarely about, you don't see people bragging about time or that type of thing. It's all about maybe like people they've met, or just like epic scenery and stuff. And I think that really excites a lot of people, especially, I think most people have that kind of need for kind of nature as such.
Yeah.
Even if you don't realize it because you're in a city like London. But you think, if you say to friends or family, let's go away for the weekend, generally like people are like super excited, right? They're eager to do whatever it is, even if it's like, okay, I want to climb to that peak, and they've never climbed that before, but they're like, I want to do that, right? So I think it's kind of that same excitement. It's kind of that unknown, but knowing that ultimately you're gonna enjoy it, I think, and you're not gonna get judged for being slow or being fast. Like, no one cares. And you can be, I think we're going to touch on it as well, like big runners and stuff like you're not going to be, if you turn up at 100 kilo or you turn up at 60 kilo, like, do you know what I mean? There's no kind of like, oh, what are you doing here type of thing. So I think for a lot of people, they're starting to see that ultra running is a way to just socialize as well, which is a big thing.
Do you, so I guess where the popularity in like social media and stuff is, it's, what is it? It's Ultra XO. I see
Ultra X,
yeah, Ultra X. That's it. Yeah. So I see the stuff on socials. I see it a lot, and obviously I know you're partnered with them. You do a lot with them. So it's the. Do you think people are starting to think about going too far too quickly? Because like how the 5K fad at the start of lockdown. Are you because I've seen it and I've thought, do you know what? I'm just going to do a 50K. I thought, and I'm nowhere near primed for a 50K. But I'm just because I see it and I am drawn to it because it's going to bring the type of person that wants to push themselves. Do you feel that people might push themselves too soon with the rise in popularity of the ultra endurance, or do you think there's because of how big of a task it is, it might actually keep people and actually make people train smart towards these goals?
I think you're always going to have an element of that. People just want to jump into something and do it, right? And again, whether that's ultra running, whether it's road running, whether it's CrossFit, like everyone wants to be able to do ring muscle ups, but no one wants to do the drills, right? To get to it. So I think there's always going to be that element, and there's always going to, good or bad, be kind of a place for that of people just like being like, I'm going to do this challenge in 4 weeks. And we see a lot of it on social, right? Like when people do charity events, they haven't trained for it.
Yeah.
But they're like, I'm going to do this in 2 weeks. And people are like, you're amazing.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not. You're a bit of an idiot. But you're doing it for a good cause.
Yeah.
Type thing. So I think there's always going to be a place for that. But I think people respect, or once they start training for an ultra event, let's say a 50K, right? Which is kind of in ultra running, that's your kind of your beginner level, right? Of distance running. Even with that, like you need to put a lot into training schedule and recovery around that. So I think once people kind of dip their toe in it, they start to realize, actually, this isn't going to be as easy as what I thought. And especially if they're looking at partaking in a race with elevation, it changes things completely. Again, if you come from around London and you're a road-based background, like you're going to be in for a shock. Because you've probably got about 10 meters average elevation on your road.
Wow.
So I think there's that realization very early on that you need to kind of prepare for it in the right way and give yourself enough time. So like from my side, I generally won't work with anyone unless they've got more than 6 months between a race in prep for a race. And that's just kind of a rule that I have. That I don't believe there's any kind of scientific reasoning behind that, but I feel that 6 months is enough for either a newbie to prepare for a race or someone with more experience who has probably raced before to give them enough time between events to recover and then rebuild. So I kind of like always that 6 month window, and that can be, like I said, whether it's a 50K, 100K, 125s. Obviously when you're looking at 250s and stuff like that, you're obviously looking at a much longer prep, but the minimum that I would have a client prep for is around 6 months.
Awesome. And I guess one thing I wanted to ask you today was, what are the other considerations preparation time? Crucial to know, like, the longer the race, the longer the prep, but what else do you think about total mileage per week, those sorts of things?
Well, yeah, you've obviously got 2 ways to look at it, right? So let's say you're pairing up a 100K on pretty much route and 100K on a trail. So perfect example, Ultra X a couple months ago on an event called Dawn Till Dusk, which because of all kind of COVID, they basically put on a team event around the UK. So it was a self kind of routed race, right? So you had 12 hours basically to complete a maximum distance in a team. And obviously the majority of people were London based. So preparing for that, I had 3 clients who'd done it. Preparing for that, it was all about time on feet, because we knew there wasn't an elevation challenge. We knew we had the luxury of kind of car stops every 5-6K, and kind of so really drilling that, and you didn't have to carry potentially like 10 plus kilo on you with all your fuel, etc. So in terms of that, you're looking at fairly basic kind of progressive overload with running volume, your longer runs getting longer, back-to-back runs, potentially double run days in there. Elevation, run density, as such. So you're looking at places like Box Hills, Swains Lane, where you can get 500+ meters of climbing in kind of an hour or 2 hours. So then, of course, with that, you wouldn't be looking at necessarily having a client run 100+ K a week, because you try and do that and add in potential goal of trying to get 2,000 to 3,000 meters of climbing a week, you're going to absolutely kill yourself. So there's obviously kind of different focus there. And then obviously you can take into account kind of cross training, looking at the turbo, kind of big gear sessions on there, and utilizing that in the elevated kind of race focus sessions. But ultimately for most people, it's just about getting out on the road, building up your base, so your zone 2, your zone 3, and being able to maintain that over 3, 4, 5+ hours. Because the reality is, when you partake in let's say 100K again, even if you're at the top end of kind of the elite side of that, you're still looking at kind of 9-10 hours.
Wow.
Right? So that's still a long time.
Yeah.
And so for the average runner, you're looking at 13, 14, 15 hours.
Jeez.
So we need to get you comfortable being on your feet for at least, I would say, 50% of that.
Wow.
How do you do that? What's the process look like?
Maybe after the Ironman, mate. That might be my next thing.
So again, obviously, the considerations when a client comes to you is obviously what their starting point is, right? Maybe they've got a history in road running, some marathons, and now they want to take that step. So there you're probably looking at someone who's, even if they've trained badly for it, they've ultimately still completed marathons, right, in the past. So they've probably been running 40, 50, 60K a week for numerous weeks at a time and months. So they've built up some sort of resilience there. So then what you're looking at is obviously going back to, you're looking at obviously data from heart rate zones, their kind of effort levels, right, and seeing where their weak point is. Like, are they spending likely too much in the red zone or in zone 4 on their kind of easy runs? So naturally, you're going to start to scale that back. And then ultimately, you're going to look at what else can you bring into their training week that is going to benefit them. So most people are obviously going slightly wrong with the S&C side of things, and just kind of doing your generalized strength work, which again will get you so far, because the base level of strength, we need it. But again, looking at smaller areas of focus, looking at how that relates to working in gait as well, will obviously make a difference kind of as you go into kind of that prep phase, right? And then obviously if you get someone who's a complete beginner, that's going to look very different in terms of the only focus at the moment is building hour, 2 hours on feet per week. Like, it's not that exciting, and that's the reality of it, right? You can't suddenly expect to be running 50K a week straight out of the back of it. So then you're looking at obviously a longer prep, and with that beginner client, you're looking at obviously every aspect of movement, strength work in there, and that they can build kind of endurance in the legs and their aerobic capacity without necessarily overloading them on the road or on a trail. Because the last thing you want, obviously, and you obviously need to be very careful of when starting with someone who's new to the sport, is obviously that kind of pushing them too quickly, because of course they're going to say it feels great, right? Yeah. They're going to be like, oh yeah, that run was fine, I could run further. But you as the coach obviously has to decide, okay, like naturally there's a route we have to follow, but if we have options to utilize a turbo, things like ski ergs in ultra running is obviously a huge asset to be able to utilize. So when you're using your poles in the mountains, you've actually developed some kind of specific strength in that area. So there's kind of plenty of ways you can obviously utilize different aspects of fitness for running. But ultimately, like anything, it just depends on the person in front of you.
That's a really good point.
When you are dealing with such distances, like, do you focus more on, say, the heart rate side of things, or do you focus on at all like kilometer splits when you've got on like marathons or anything like that? Because I guess as you've mentioned, is you've got such varying terrains and stuff like that, you can't necessarily focus so much on, say, I want you to run, say, a 6-minute kilometer place. So it's like, but So where does that come into consideration when you are programming?
So I think if we go kind of from the endpoint, so in a race, I think the reality is heart rate kind of goes out the window because again, you're going to have obviously all this kind of pre-event anxiety and nerves in there, probably too much caffeine, and you've then got to deal with very kind of random points of elevation, right? So it's not as simple as being or saying to yourself, okay, when I get to that hill, I'm going to bring my heart rate down to 140 beats per minute. It just doesn't happen, right? So the whole point is that we get you to the race utilizing a mix of heart rate work, just RPE scales, and utilizing that, which for most people can be the best way to go, just because, yes, we want to limit your high-end exertion, but again, kind of Rob, what we were talking about before we started, there's only so long you can work with someone. Let's say you're trying to get them to run in their zone 2. If that's just not happening for whatever reason, whether it's the person kind of too stubborn and they need a bit of an ego tickle and they don't want to put on their Strava that they're running an 8-minute kilometer and they want to edit it and change it to a 5-minute kilometer. There are obviously things to take into consideration, right? Because ultimately the client's just going to start to become a bit kind of disheartened with the process. So actually then reflecting it into an RPE scale and be like, okay, just work out 4 out of 10. Whatever 4 out of 10 is today, work off that. And then suddenly they don't think about their heart rate. And then what we find over time is naturally that base is coming down and they're slowly starting to work in that blue zone, that green zone for longer without even realizing. So I think with ultra running, there's no point in using pace specific splits in training. Like it just doesn't have a place. And even again, the top guys won't utilize that. They'll just know their kind of feel good pace and go off that. So they're almost going off kind of an RPE scale as well, because they'll know if they go past 8, they're kind of working way too hard, right? Obviously with marathon, half marathons, 10Ks, that type of thing, it is very much more pace orientated, right? Everyone has an end goal. They want to complete a marathon in 3.5 hours. So naturally there, you're going to have to mix the training week up with some specific splits, but also some around their recovery run.
Nice. So just basically on that, it's just I'm thinking like in my own personal training at the moment. I went for a zone 2 run the other day, and I was running around 7.5 and 8 minute kilometers, and keeping my heart rate around 133. And I was during it, I was like, I feel like I'm essentially walking, and I was trotting, and it's just I instantly actually thought of you, because I remember you put an Insta story at one. Yeah, you put up a story, and it was I think when you was prepping around the track, and you was just saying I'm trotting, and it was that word, and that's exactly what I felt like, because it's just it's such a steady pace, and for me, I was like, look, I've been told to try and do this. I was straight off the bike. So I was like, I'm going to give this a proper try, because my easy runs are always too hard. And I definitely go closer to, say, zone 4 in my easy runs, which I know isn't good. So if I can't stay in zone 2, well, no, because it's, as you said, it's my ego really. But if I drift into zone 3, is that a problem, basically?
I mean, I think there's a fine line between obviously like we can't just kind of say zone 2, let's say the difference between 134 and 135 beats per minute is like going to take you over the end, right? It's not as kind of linear as that, and it doesn't make sense, right? So again, if we're spending, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks trying to really focus in on hard, still finding, like we said, for whatever reason, the client is not either adhering to them stats, or like they're in it for a bit, but then they suddenly see someone and they want to chase them for a bit and they pull back into it. Then I think the easiest thing to do, you obviously have a conversation with them and trying to find out what the reasoning is. But then I think you fall back into RPE scales and work off an effort, because then it's real honest, right? Like Rob, there's no way you could say your zone 2 effort and your zone 4 effort is exactly the same.
No.
Exactly, right? Where actually, if you were just going off your heart rate, potentially it might feel like you're actually not working too far apart from each other.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
But if you said, okay, what was out of 10, and you're like 4, you're lying.
Yeah. So I've been in that. So this is where I guess with running in general, especially when you're trying to choose run for these longer distances or anything really, it's that running in essentially that grey zone, that bit in the middle, which is going to. Where's there a place for, say, that zone 4, like that middle ground, so where you're not really at your high stuff and you're not at your low? So why should you be running around? Because within cycling, that's around like your sweet spot, so like you're just under FTP. So there's obviously, when you're not talking about polarized training where you've got the extremes and you're just sticking around that threshold kind of pace, where would the value be for that within running, and where would you utilize that in your training?
So I think it's very goal dependent and event dependent, right? So naturally, if we start off at marathons, and we'll just call it or road running, right? There's naturally a need for speed as such, right? So you're going to have to work, and if you've done a marathon, you'll know you're not going to be in zone 2 for very long. Even if you're not racing the marathon, it's just not going to happen, right? So you obviously need to build that capacity in that zone 3, 4 area, right? But again, it's just simply controlling and having the client understand that working in that red zone too often is obviously not sustainable, right? And then all that's going to happen is they're going to get frustrated because you start giving them split. They're not going to be able to maintain that split for a block of 12 minutes, right? They're going to fall off a cliff after 6. So I think slowly there's almost like it's almost like with a toddler, right? You kind of just let them fall over and they get back up and they start to kind of learn. Right. And it's kind of the same thing with a client. The whole point with coaching a client with running isn't to be like necessarily you're crap at this is what you need to do only. It's about developing their knowledge, right? So when they go away, they also understand, okay, this is what I need to be doing and the basics of that. So sometimes I'll purposely let clients just almost like stray away from a program in a sense. So you can see that in their Garmin data, they're starting to form a little habit, right? With kind of the higher zone work. So sometimes I won't necessarily call them out on it or have that conversation with them too early. And I'll let them slowly kind of creep more into that higher end zone over these kind of endurance blocks. Because suddenly they're going to get to a point where they just can't achieve the block. And then they're going to come to you asking the question. And then you've kind of got 3-4 weeks of data where you can be like, okay, you can see here at these points you started to kind of fall off the cliff and everything started to fall apart, cadence, heart rate was spiking. And again, they slowly start to understand running the blue zone. Someone's like, yeah, all right. They don't really know what that means, right? So you need to let them experience it themselves. But in terms of, there is obviously a place for kind of the higher zone work. And again, we're not talking about redlining here. And everyone's tolerance to that kind of higher end is slightly different. Obviously, ashes on the assault bike is very good. And then in terms of ultra running, you're, again, in a real race scenario, you're going to experience peaks with your heart rate. Because again, if you've got a climb that's 200-300 meters, there's no way you're keeping your heart rate in kind of zone 2, zone 3, right? And especially as it gets later on in the race. So within training, with ultra running, there's a big aspect of it is really kind of a bit of grunt work and a bit of grinding. Because yes, we want to develop that time on feet, but we need to also show you the reality of when you start climbs. Like, you can't go into it thinking, oh, when I get to this climb, I'll just chill in zone 2, it's fine. I'll just go slower. Like, it's just not going to happen. Even if you're walking it, like, your heart rate's going to be through the roof. So, again, kind of going back to what I said before, utilizing places like Box Hill, Swains Lane, any type of kind of elevation you can get, and simply just doing kind of almost tedious, like, up and down routes. So run up, jog down, run up, jog down. Right. And you're developing that resilience. And by no means is it max effort. You're working at maybe 60, 70%. But the accumulation over an hour or so of that is naturally going to see that heart rate delve into kind of the higher end of, let's say, zone 4, right? So you're not putting yourself in a hole where it's like, this is impossible, but you're developing some resilience to that. You're getting used to that feeling of kind of like heart rate through the roof, but you can manage it. Because really the whole aim with ultra run is that by the time you get to a top of a climb, you want to be able to kind of settle that heart rate as quickly as possible, right? So so part of that is obviously understanding what to expect. Because otherwise you're going into it blind. There's no way you can control something that you don't really understand, in essence. So I think in both the road running world and ultra running, there's a huge place for this kind of zone 3, zone 4, pushing the limits. But it needs to be used kind of very sparingly. I always use the phrase of kind of like drip feeding it. So it's not going to be there every week or even every 2 weeks, but suddenly you'll have a session where it's like, okay, this is, and then you take it out again for a couple of weeks, and then it's there again, right? Because again, you'll see how they react to it. You see how they recover from it, and then you can obviously build upon that.
Nice. That's
awesome, mate. We've spoken a lot about ultra. I think a lot of our listeners are hopefully not going to be doing ultras soon. So have you got any tips for sort of more recreational beginner runners if they're just starting to add running into their program? I guess number one, why should they add running into their program? I think everyone should run, and like from a biomechanical point of view, the body was evolved for gait and for running. If we just look at the way muscles are attached to the bones, it's very evident that gait is a huge part of why they are like they are. And from your point of view, if somebody is starting to run, what are the key things they need to be focusing on, say, building up from zero? But I think quite a common use case is people who train a lot but don't run at all, and then they want to start running. And because they're very fit, they're probably able to do a lot of running, but potentially shouldn't. Can you give us your thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to almost like a respect for running, in a sense. I think people see it as like a very, yes, anyone can do it, but so then people don't give it kind of the respect I guess it needs. Like if you was to start an Olympic lifting program, you don't just dive into the deep end straight away, right? Or any type of functional fitness program. There's kind of, there's kind of points of entry and benchmarks and stuff that you need to be doing, and you can't do too much of this per week. So I feel like with running, people just see it as, I'll just go for a run, and they end up smashing themselves kind of 2-3 times a week. So it comes back to doing too much too soon type attitude. And like you said, because they're already quite fit, so that, again, they have this expectation that they should be able to do X amount, a 5K in this time or a 10K in this time, right? So leaving the ego at the door is obviously something that's quite hard for a lot of people. But in a running sense, if it's something that you're not doing, of course you can't expect to not necessarily perform whilst you're partaking in that, because you might actually, like you said, they're very capable of running, right? But maybe it's the knock-on effect of that. So maybe you're starting to get some discomfort or some tightness where you're not experienced it before, and then it's affecting your primary training. Do you know what I mean? It's having a knock-on effect, but you're not necessarily associating it to the running. You're just like, I'm just a bit tight, right? Or whatever it is. So I think it's literally respecting running in a simple sense, and building it slowly. The reality is, if you're utilizing running as a additional form of exercise to your primary exercise, so let's say you're doing CrossFit, a lot of erg work, you don't necessarily need to be running 3 times a week. Like you just don't, right? You're likely getting enough aerobic and anaerobic kind of work there without kind of the potential negative effects of running that you don't need to be doing. So utilizing it, and we see it in a lot of obviously CrossFit programs and functional programs, using it as like a recovery session. So setting a time-based goal, so 20, 30 minutes, just get out, go off what feels good, go off an RPE. And I think that's a nice way to get someone initially into it. And it naturally limits them on how much they're doing, because they can only literally do one session a week unless they're just going against kind of coach and what they're being programmed. So yeah, I think it boils down to obviously respecting it and leaving your ego at the door, and then understanding why you're running. Like, why? Really? Is it because you feel pressured to run because everyone else is doing it around you, or is it because you're going to be prepping for, I don't know, something like a turf games or something like that, where there's a bit of kind of running in there, so you need to kind of familiarize yourself with that a bit. And then from there you can obviously assess what effect, positive or negative, it's having on everything else that you're doing, and start to kind of progress as you would your training.
Awesome. I've got a friend who's a big, strong guy, weighs about 100 kilos, and he was asking whether we could discuss top tips for the heavier runner. Are there any things you would do differently for somebody?
Lose 10 kilos. No, so I mean, like, from again my point of view, obviously, if you did naturally quite a heavy guy, so kind of when I left the military, I was already kind of 89, 90 kilo. So, and then so for the past kind of 7-8 years, I've sat between 90 and 96, 97 kilo. And that's all whilst obviously undertaking like 100Ks, 125s, and kind of extreme endurance, right? So I think if you're kind of probably like Rob as well, that's your kind of natural weight. I don't really think there's too much of an issue because you're used to that. Your joints and tendons are used to carrying that load, right? I think it's different if suddenly if Ash, you put on 10 kilo, which could happen, all them curls, and then
give me 2 months, mate. That's all I need.
And then you start kind of hammering yourself, right? Just like if you suddenly lose 10 kilo, it's not going to be beneficial, right? So it's kind of the same thing. And so in terms of things to consider, probably when you turn up at races, people might look at you like you shouldn't be here. I mean, I think it's understanding. Like, for me, a biggest thing was understanding that I'm not over trail. I'm not going to be as fast as a guy who's 70 kilo or 75 kilo. Right? It's just not going to happen. Like, even if I'm going to have points in a race where I'm potentially stronger, but overall, if we look at kind of our average speed and our pace and stuff like that, he's naturally likely going to be more efficient than me, right? So I think kind of, again, falling back to kind of ego and just leaving it out of it. Like, you can't expect to be doing necessarily something that someone who's 25 kilo lighter than you is doing in a primarily based aerobic sport. Right? It's just not going to happen. So I think that was the biggest thing for me. And also, again, from a road marathon and kind of that side of things, it was just like, it doesn't matter if you're heavy. Like, do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. Like, if you're heavier or you're lighter, what does it matter? You see it in CrossFit as well. There's people who are absolutely stacked and there's people who are not, right? It doesn't come into play necessarily. So I think in kind of your more conventional running, it doesn't play a part really, or there's not necessarily anything to consider apart from kind of a bit of an ego probably kick in at the beginning. When you're obviously looking at more endurance side of things, there's obviously a lot more around fueling and stuff like that you're going to have to take into consideration just because you're a heavier guy, right? And you're going to need a lot more per hour than someone who's 25 kilo lighter than you. But yeah, in terms of road run, I'll just say kind of embrace your mass.
To be fair, it's funny because, like, when I turned up to the triathlon the other day, and it's just, you look around and you either have overweight people, you have people that are obviously in good shape, typical triathlon shape, and then you've got there are very few people that look like, say, they lift or they're a bit bigger, like someone like myself who's just like, doesn't look like you should be there really, because you do look different. And I think you're right to that point of, say, not really caring, because you're going to be better at some things. And now when it comes to cycling, I'm going to be better at all out, say, sprint, because of just the sheer power I could put behind a pedal than someone, say, going up a hill. doesn't mean that I can't go up the hill well, but that person that's a bit lighter will most likely get up there easier. So then I have to make sure I'm better in other places. But I definitely feel something that I actually took from you was shoe choice was a really important one for, like, because you mentioned obviously about certain shoes to wear for being a bigger runner. And it's like, so I bought the on running the X ones, like the standard ones, and I got the Hoka Clifton 7s, Hoka One ones. And I've used the on runnings for like shorter distances, like 5Ks, and I found them relatively uncomfortable because I just put so much. I can feel all the soles. So you know how obviously all the individuals. I can feel all of that on my foot, and that's quite uncomfortable in a race. Whereas with my Hokas, I'm just like, they're some of the nicest running trainers I've ever worn, and after you recommended them, I was like, it was such a good recommendation because it's like I haven't felt any niggles or anything really while I've been running, and because I've been training, say, relatively smart, as in gradually accumulating volume. I guess my body is getting a lot more comfortable with that constant trauma. So that 100 kilos going through my joints, because I've not just jumped the gun. Well, when I did just jump the gun and ran a 15K out of the blue, my body felt it for about 3-4 days afterwards. So, but since then, I think that one mistake there, it's been building up and stuff like that. And it has been such a difference using those trainers. And I guess it's not just the trainers, and it's obviously like training load progressively getting more, but I've definitely found them really beneficial for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Hoka Cliftons are probably the best trainer I've ever used, to be fair, over the past few years. They're brilliant. And like I said, for kind of heavier, the 90 plus kilo models, they come in very handy. I think things like the Cloud X and stuff like that from On are obviously, they're designed as like a cross training trainer, right? So they're great in kind of your functional WODs and stuff like that, where you're maybe doing a 400-meter run between rounds or something like that. But I think anything substantial, like I used them last year on the track a bit, just for some kind of like interval in there. And even after accumulating in a session like 3-4K, again, that same feeling, I was feeling pretty uncomfortable in them. So yeah, I think the shoes that are marketed like basically a hybrid, right, between your CrossFit trainer and your running trainer should only be used in your standard WODs and Metcon, stuff like that. I think anything where you're solely just running, you need a specific run trainer. And yeah, I think the Hoka, like what you said, Rob, they've been a brilliant shoe.
Is there any other, say, like equipment or anything that you'd recommend for, say, newbie runners that are maybe want to take this a little bit more seriously? So obviously you've mentioned about like heart rate and like your Garmin. So is that basically it? Just like a good pair of running trainers and a heart rate belt?
Yeah, I mean, in the reality, right, you don't need much else. Again, if you're looking at just you're kind of introducing running into your week, what like you don't need a Salomon pack to run around the city for 5K type of thing.
So you mean you don't need a free train? You don't need one of those with the you don't need that, no?
I was just about to say you can treat yourself to one of them if you want. But no, I mean that's the reality of it, right? You just need a decent pair of trainers, and you're good to go, right? Even things like Apple Watch and stuff like that will track things. You don't necessarily need a Garmin. Like you just don't, right? And I think people, again, it's like with anything, right? People go into it and they want all the gear first, and then kind of wonder why they're not progressing because they've got all this fancy kit, but they haven't put in the groundwork and they don't understand things, right? So it's of no use, really, right? It's like going into WIT and buying your brand new rope and your grips and stuff like that, and then just sticking them in your bag for a bit.
That's so true.
What are the other common pitfalls, Brad? Like you said, just buying all the gear and not addressing the fundamentals. What are the other things you see beginners commonly make as mistakes?
Going back to kind of that, doing too much too early. So again, maybe it's something to do with social media. People see like a 10K as kind of, I'll just go for a 10K type thing. Like, and that's quite a substantial distance, right, in the scheme of things. And I think people just expect to be able to run this distance in again, a set time because of what they see on social media and Strava and stuff like that. And almost they have this pressure, I guess, even though no one actually cares. It is like you look on Strava, it's rarely that you look at someone and you're like wow, like I'm going to compete with that person, type thing, right? Like more so when I look at Strava, it's just a spy on client.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, what the hell are you doing there? But no, I think it falling back to that kind of respect and respecting running in a simple sense. Like I said, you wouldn't get on an assault bike, or maybe you will get an assault bike and try sprint 100 cal, but you'd soon find out it's not possible, right? And you're gonna literally fall off a cliff. And I think, I don't know why. Maybe it's like what Ash, you said, kind of biomechanically we're meant to run. So I feel like people just forget like the demands of it and what you actually need to be a good runner in whatever you class as a runner. Or to be able to utilize it as a recovery method within your training week. Like I see so much on Instagram of like someone goes for a recovery run on a Thursday and they're in like zone 4-5. I'm like, that's not a recovery run. Right? So I think people get mixed up because they'll see like 3K as a recovery, but they're not taking into considerations heart rate and effort and stuff like that, right? So a recovery run really, like for instance, for myself and clients when we're training for races, a recovery run can be a half marathon. Like in the reality, the reality of it, right?
Yeah.
If I adhere to kind of heart rate zones and my RPE and stuff like that, that becomes the recovery session in my week, or it can be a 5K. But I could also, just like Rob, and I'm playing around with kind of brick sessions at the moment. So I could get off the bike and suddenly a 4K run, I'm redlining it. That's not a recovery process, even though it's just 4K. So I think, people need to understand that, like utilizing running in a way that's going to benefit your other training. So if you're just kind of running once a week, you probably just need to utilize it as a recovery method within your training. And then if you're running more frequently, 3 times a week, you can start to build some sort of structure. So maybe you have a kind of your base run, a speed emphasis session, and a recovery session. But if you're really utilizing it once a week, I would pretty much say that's just needs to be a recovery focus there.
That's interesting, actually, because I wanted to kind of touch on, say, programming for the general public and maybe some considerations that they need to take in for, because I have, say, a couple of clients that say just like to go for 1 run a week because they do it in between lifting, but they do kind of want to, say, get better at running. So would a recovery run be the right thing for them to do there? So just mainly, as you say, focusing on heart rate and stuff and maybe keeping it within a manageable range and maybe then accumulating volume week on week or every couple of weeks or so forth. And because I find a lot of my clients just don't have the time to say, or they choose not to have the time to have run, say, 2 to 3 times a week. And then based off that question, if someone can run multiple times a week, what's some of the baseline like sessions you should make sure they do every week, depending on the amount of volume they can get in?
Yeah, so going on to the first one, I think if someone's just running, if you have a client who's running once a week, and definitely a recovery run can help them become a more efficient runner, right? Because in a recovery session, in reality, you should be able to focus on your breathing, your posture, because ultimately you should be in quite a relaxed state. Right, get from A to B as quickly as possible and forget about what your arms are doing, kind of that you're now kind of chest is facing the floor and whatnot, right? So I think a recovery session is potentially one of the best ways to actually have someone become a more efficient runner because they can actually focus on things.
Okay.
And again, you're not going to give them 5 things to focus on in that session, but you can say, okay, let's just focus on relaxing the shoulders a bit more and utilizing the arm, right? And then after a few weeks, that's starting to become a bit more natural. And then you can start to focus on other methods, right, in their running. But I also think kind of following on from that, for most people, it's not about changing the way they run. Like it's not about, so when people think of a running coach, they think of changing form. it's generally not about that, right? Because, and Ash, you'll know, like, trying to change the way someone runs is going to take forever. Realistically, if someone, let's say you've been running for 5 years, not really having a kind of clue what you're doing, and then you get a coach. That coach needs to try and undo worth of work, of a very kind of natural movement. So just things is going to be very hard. Yes, we can look at things like cadence and arm drives and stuff like that, but that's not necessarily changing the way you run. That's just making you more efficient. Right? So I think a recovery run, again, going back to that now, is the perfect way to start implementing them things in. But again, it all goes back to having the client understand why you're asking them to focus on certain things. So if you just say to your client, okay, let's try and get your cadence to this, you need to have them understand why, because otherwise, after about 5 minutes, they're just going to be like,
and go back to what they like.
It's not that type thing. And then, yeah, exactly. Because again, naturally, as we fatigue, right, we're going to start to go back to bad habits. It's just obviously the way we work. And then going on to someone who did, what was the next one, Rob? Someone
just
who could
multiple
run
times a week. So is there if you could run an ideal amount of times, obviously maybe the more the better, but say for instance 3 times a week, or say 2 times a week, is there, say, some things that you make sure you get done per week to, say, look to improve?
Yeah, I mean, so going off again, it's near impossible to say like an ideal number of how many times you should run a week, because that's very person dependent and goal orientated, right? But I've got runners who will complete 125 to 250 Ks, and they only run 2 times a week because they'll utilize other methods of training to supplement that. And also their time allowance will dictate that we can actually then gain some good time on feet in them 2 runs. So rather than breaking it up into like 4 runs a week where you've got like a recovery run, maybe a moderate distance run, let's say 90 minutes, then another run and another run, maybe their life that only allows it on the weekend, they can really get out and run. Or if we're looking at specifics, okay, what's the event we need to be able to get to? We need to get out of London to trail. Maybe they can't do that Monday to Friday. So we need to, again, you need to take into consideration a lot of things, right? But then on the other hand, I've got clients who will run 5 times a week. So it's finding what works for the client. And ultimately, in the end of the day, you need to find what they enjoy as well. Because there's no point in forcing it so much that they're like, okay, well, I'm not enjoying running that much, even though obviously the goal is an ultra event or a marathon, whatever it is. But you need to still take into account enjoyment. Obviously, that's where we can utilize the turbo, types of ergs and watt bikes, stuff in there. But in a general sense, if you're looking at someone who's obviously going to be, let's say, prepping for a marathon, then obviously you'd want some sort of either progressive effort, so tempo session in there, where they're gradually working on off through zones. So let's say a zone 2 to zone 3, zone 2 to zone 4, and back and forth. So they're, with that, obviously the focus could be around kind of utilizing and controlling their breathing, because ultimately that's one of the ways you're obviously going to be able to manipulate your pace, right, and your heart rate off that. Then you're looking at obviously a speed session in there, which obviously most people love to kind of smash out and do multiple times a week. But again, you really need to take that into account in terms of, does that person actually need to be better at speed, or is there other things that are going wrong? Because not everyone needs a speed session in their training. Like, that's the reality of it, right? Where obviously some people actually do need to work on kind of just that top end, not necessarily their top end speed, but they're more kind of zone 3, zone 4 work. And they need to experience what that feels like. Because again, in a race, if you said, okay, I want to do a marathon in 3 hours, we know your minimum pace, right, that you need to be at. So we need to start, if that's nowhere near where you're currently at, we need to obviously start drip feeding your tolerance in there and seeing, okay, that's what that's going to feel like for 10 minutes and longer and longer. And then the third one would be your recovery run.
Nice.
So again, just chilled on the weekends and enjoying just kind of no data and stuff and just getting out there.
Yeah, I've definitely found that within my running week, I have normally one brick session, so one say straight off the bike, which is normally like an easy recovery run. I have one say longer one that's normally it's programmed as say easy to start, and then if I want to start to increase the pace, I can. And then I normally have like a speed or some hill sprint session. And what I've definitely found is yesterday I went a little bit rogue as you do, and off the bike. I ran a little bit of a harder effort, but that was I just started to feel really good. I was like, do you know what? I'm going to see what happens. And so I started running off the bike for 4K at a 4:45 kilometer pace. And I was I felt really good because the day on the it was just the day before. I probably shouldn't have done that. On the Wednesday, I did 4x1K at 4-minute kilometers then. And they were feeling really like strong. But the reason why I was going to this was because the breathing elements, and when you said like you're in a race and you can try and set out at a pace, but there's so many elements to the race environment that you say you're unaware of that it's going to change how you feel. And I know when I was racing on the weekend that I felt so good running at say a 4:55 kilometer. I was feeling and for me that was relatively fast, and I was feeling really good. But because I've been training doing these 4x1Ks and I've been doing some of these higher intensities, is as you said, I've experienced that pain. I've experienced that tolerance of breathing hard and finding that rhythm, and that's where I've been really feeling the benefit from these higher end work. But just listening to today's talk, I've got a 12K planned for today. It says easier things. So I'm going to run it easy. I'm going to see what I'm going to try and take an hour and a half.
Got to see like 4.5 minutes.
Not quite. No.
That's brilliant.
But no,
you go, Brad.
Go on, Ash. Oh, cool. I think it's again, people expect their fitness in the gym, let's say, to cross over to their running, and of course it will to an extent, depending on what you're doing. But again, I think it just boils down to why you're running. Like, are you just running, like I said, that once a week to enjoy it? Are you running with some friends, or are you is the longer term plan to start getting a bit more into kind of half marathons, whatever it is? Because naturally your start point needs to be slightly different and your focus from the outset needs to be slightly different.
Yeah, I think that's probably the key takeaway, and not an original one if anyone's been listening to the show for a while, is just get clear on why you're doing it in the first place. Once you have clarity over what the goal is, a lot of decisions make themselves, and it's very obvious what you should do. Like you're saying about if you have a 3-hour marathon target, you need to be able to run those splits for a marathon duration. So there's a very clear end point. So you can look at your time frame and say, is it reasonable for me to either get that fast in that period of time or get that fast over that duration in that period of time, and make a nice, steady, progressive plan to track against and see whether it's a feasible thing to do or not. And yeah, I think that point, we hammer it constantly, but it is the most crucial thing for people to realize, that until you're clear on what you're moving towards, it's very difficult to pull together a structured plan.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've all been there, right? When you're just kind of, again, whether it's in the gym or out of the gym, you're just training for the sake of training, and you obviously don't really make any progress. And after a while, you get pretty fed up with that. So I think that's kind of where most people get out with running, because they'll run for, let's say during the summer, they'll run. They haven't necessarily seen the progress they expected to, and then they kind of don't run for like 4 or 5 months. They're like, oh, I'm just going to run again, right? And naturally with that, you can't expect to see any substantial progress. So yeah, the biggest thing I find with, again, your kind of recreational runners is almost the ego. I think is the biggest thing. again, comparing that to the endurance side of things and the ultra side of things, I think there's a little bit less of that just because reality sets in fairly quickly with what you're about to do. But I feel like with, again, your 5, 10Ks and type of thing, people expect to see these numbers because on social when they see their friends doing it and they're fitter than them in the gym, so they should be fitter than them out the gym and stuff like that. So yeah, I would say it's just minimizing your ego to start running.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. Mate, I really appreciate the time. You know, we've covered a lot, and I've learned a lot. So I think today's session is going to be a little bit different for me. Ash, is there anything else?
We'll see how your 12K goes.
I'm going to try my absolute hardest to run at zone 2/3, maybe a little bit of 4.
Try and say hard to take it easy.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate it, mate. So, is there anything? Where can people find you online if they haven't and they want to know more about you?
Instagram, BW Commando Fitness. Run Strong as well is on there, which again, kind of falling back into conventional running and ultra running. Obviously, BW Commando Fitness is more aimed at the kind of extreme endurance type of thing, and working with people who are challenging themselves over these distances and prepping for that type of thing, where our Run Strong community is more based on kind of your everyday runner, in a sense of like people have 5K goals, 10K goals, or just to be able to run pain-free a couple times a week. So there is actual no ultimate race goal, which is about enjoying running.
Nice. Oh, beautiful. So, mate, really appreciate your time. We'll put all the links down below so that people can find you nice and easy. As always, if you did enjoy this episode, please do share it with someone that you think will really benefit from it, and leave a comment. And really appreciate again your time, Brad. Thanks a lot for listening.
Always.
And
I'll probably see you next week in Whip. I'm doing my video too.
Oh, nice. Well, you've got 2 numbers to beat. You got the premium one over here of 51.
I'm doing 2 tests. I'm doing it on the assault bike on Tuesday and then on the treadmill as well.
On the treadmill, nice.
Yeah.
Sick.
So it'll be interesting to pair and then have 2 data records for kind of each gym scenario and run scenarios.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see. So, yeah, thanks a lot for your time. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Right, cheers, boys.
Cheers, guys.
Okay.